Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. For this one, you guys sent in some seriously interesting stuff. We're talking excerpts from mastering software testing, specifically usability, regression, and exploratory testing.
Yeah, really good stuff.
So today we're going to try to cut through all the heavy technical jargon and give you a clear picture of how these methodologies actually make sure the software we use every single day, actually works as it should.
Right, exactly. It's like, think of this as your express lane to understanding the core of software quality.
Okay, so ready to dive in?
Absolutely, let's do it.
All right, so we're going to tackle three major approaches,
Yeah.
right? The ones that really underpin reliable software. We've got usability testing, regression testing, and then exploratory testing.
And each one kind of gives you like a unique perspective, a different lens to evaluate and then improve software.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so let's start with usability testing. Now, this one, I think at its heart, it's about making software not just functional,
Mhm.
but actually easy to use, enjoyable even.
Yeah, for sure. Right. For like, for anyone, for you, for me, for anyone using it. Like, we're talking about that intuitive, efficient experience where you're just like, okay, this just works. This makes sense.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of really specific goals,
Yeah.
that are behind that. Like, think about learnability. So how quickly can someone who's brand new to a piece of software,
Mm-hmm.
you know, maybe you're trying a new app or you're
Yeah.
trying a new website, like how fast can you figure out the basics?
Right, right.
And then there's, efficiency too, right? Like how
Mm.
fast can you actually do what you need to do in the app?
Mm-hmm.
Are there like clumsy steps? Or is the layout confusing and it gets in your way?
Yeah, and it's not just about speed either, right?
Yeah.
It's also about those moments where you're like, "Oh, shoot, I made a mistake." The errors that we as users make, right?
Mhm.
So usability testing really aims to pinpoint like those common sticking points. Like where do people get tripped up? Where, maybe even you've gotten tripped up. And then ultimately it's about satisfaction too. Right. Like do you finish using a piece of software or an app or whatever it is feeling good about the experience, or are you frustrated?
Yeah, do you want to use it again?
Right, exactly. Exactly.
So to kind of get a handle on all of this, like on all those aspects, testers use different like techniques, right?
Mhm.
So one is moderated testing, and that's where, they observe real users interacting with the software,
Mhm.
and they can ask questions and stuff while they're doing that.
Okay. Interesting.
And then there's unmoderated testing,
Mm.
where users just kind of test on their own, like independently.
Yeah.
And they'll often like record their screen and their voice while they're doing it.
Ah, okay. So that's how they get those insights when like nobody's watching,
Yeah.
right? Like, okay, what are people actually doing?
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay, and then we have A/B testing, which I've always thought this is pretty clever, right? Where you show like two slightly different versions of something
Yeah.
to different groups of users and you see which one performs better. But it's not just about like button color though, right?
No, it's way more than that. Like you can actually use A/B testing to compare, whole user flows,
Mm.
different layouts, even like different wording on things to see, which one actually leads to better results, right? Like
Yeah.
higher conversion rates, more tasks completed, all that. And then you've got like heat maps and analytics, which, visually show where users are clicking, how they're moving around the interface.
Gotcha.
And then first click testing.
Okay.
That one specifically looks at whether users intuitively click on the right, like first option to finish something, to complete a task. And then tree testing, that's about figuring out how effective the whole navigation structure is.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's like you're almost trying to understand the user's mind through their clicks.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, now the source mentions some tools, things like user testing, Crazy Egg, Hotjar, and Google Optimize.
Right.
What are those actually doing? Like, what do they actually do?
So those are basically platforms that give you the infrastructure and the tools to run a lot of those usability testing techniques that we were just talking about. So for example, user testing lets you recruit people, participants, and you can get video recordings of them actually using your software, like speaking their thoughts out loud while they're doing it.
Oh, wow.
And then Crazy Egg and Hotjar, they give you heat maps and they do session recording so you can see what users are actually doing.
Gotcha.
And then Google Optimize. That's typically used for A/B testing and for personalizing websites.
Yeah.
So all of these tools are really about like getting concrete data on how people interact with your software.
Right. Okay. And there's a real world example that I think really brings this to life, right? It's the the food delivery app with a new checkout process.
Yes.
Like, imagine you're hungry, you're trying to pay, and you can't find the button, or the whole process is just slow, and it's just like, oh, this is so confusing, I'm so hungry. Oh, the worst. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where usability testing can come in and be super valuable, right? Like, it could show you that people are dropping off right at that payment stage.
Right.
Because maybe the button's hidden, or there are way too many steps, or whatever.
Right.
And by finding and fixing those issues before you roll it out to everybody,
Right. Exactly.
you can avoid frustrating, potentially a huge number of users, maybe even you.
Yeah, definitely. No, that makes total sense. So it's not just about, like you said, identifying the problem. It's
Yeah.
about like preventing a bad experience for everyone, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do they actually measure user experience? Like, because that always feels a little subjective.
Yeah. Yeah, there is definitely a subjective element to it, but there's also a bunch of really objective methods too. So like, you can use surveys and feedback forms to get direct input from people. You can use specific like usability metrics, like the success rate, did the person actually complete the task?
Right. You can look at time on task, like how long did it take them, and error rate, like how many mistakes are they making. You can also do what's called the think aloud protocol,
Okay.
where users just literally, they say their thoughts out loud while they're using the software.
Interesting.
That gives you really rich, like, qualitative data. And then there's something called the System Usability Scale, or SUS. That's a standardized questionnaire that gives you like a numerical score for the perceived usability of the system. So all these methods can give you tangible data points, so you could really understand like how easy and enjoyable the software is for you, for other users.
Right. For anybody, really. Okay, that gives us a really solid, I think, foundation in usability testing.
Yeah, totally.
Let's switch gears to regression testing. Now, the name, it sounds a bit like we're going backwards a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, it kind of is about making sure you don't accidentally go backwards in terms of quality.
Yeah.
Right? So regression testing is all about making sure that recent changes, like changes to the software, so it could be bug fixes, new features, performance improvements, that none of those have accidentally introduced new problems, new defects into the system.
Okay.
So it's really about making sure that the parts of the software that used to work are still working correctly.
So it's almost like a safety net then.
Yeah.
Like you're catching any accidental like slips during development, because I think we've all experienced those software updates where they break something that was working perfectly fine before.
Oh, all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Software, it's complex. And even a tiny little change in one place can cause totally unexpected problems somewhere else.
Yeah.
So regression testing it's really important for keeping the software stable and reliable, because software that you're depending on.
Right.
It helps to catch those unintended side effects from the changes.
Yeah.
And it reduces the risk, that comes with those frequent updates we all get.
Totally. So when is this type of testing actually performed? It's not something that's like constantly happening, right?
Right. It's more like it's triggered by specific events in the software development lifecycle. So like it's super important after you fix a bug, right?
Okay.
Just to confirm that, one, the fix actually worked, it's all the original problem, and two, that it didn't create any new bugs in the process.
Right. Okay.
It's also done like after new features are added, after performance improvements, when different parts of the system are being integrated together, and definitely before any major software release that you and all the other users are going to get.
Right. So pretty much any time there's a significant change to the code base, really.
Exactly.
Okay. And are there different types of regression testing? I know the source mentioned like unit, partial, and complete regression. So what's the difference between those?
So unit regression, that's focused on testing individual pieces, individual modules, like little isolated parts of the code.
Okay.
Just to make sure they're still working as expected after a change is made.
Gotcha.
And then partial regression it's a little more targeted, right? It focuses on the areas that are most likely affected by the new code.
Okay.
And then like complete regression testing, that's where you test the entire system, even parts that weren't directly touched by the changes.
Wow. Okay.
Just to make sure there weren't any like unforeseen widespread impacts from the changes.
Gotcha. Okay, so the scope of the testing really expands depending on the nature of the changes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so how do development teams approach this efficiently? Like, because I imagine rerunning every single test every single time, something changes. That sounds so time-consuming.
Oh, yeah, it can be a nightmare.
Yeah.
So that's where you need really good strategies, right? So site
Yeah.
unit testing is like essential. So tools like, Selenium,
Mm.
that's really good for automating like interactions with web browsers.
Mm-hmm.
There's JNet, that's for testing Java code.
Mm-hmm.
TestNG, which has more like advanced features. So automation is all about like running a huge bunch of these tests quickly and repeatedly.
Right. Right.
And then prioritization is really important too, right?
Okay.
You got to focus on the most critical features first,
Yeah.
the ones that you as a user are going to interact with most.
Right. The stuff that we're all using every day, basically.
Exactly, yeah. And then there's selective regression, which is really just about testing the areas that are most likely to be affected by the recent changes.
Okay, so like really targeted.
Exactly. Continuous integration, or CI/CD,
Mm.
that's where code changes are constantly being integrated and then automatically tested. And that often includes those regression tests every time there's a new deployment.
Got
And then finally, you've got like baseline comparisons, where you're basically comparing the results of old tests with the new ones to make sure that things that were fixed a while back haven't like reappeared.
Right. Okay, so you're not reintroducing those old bugs.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So automation really sounds like it's key here.
Totally, yeah.
And the source lists some common tools like Selenium and TestNG, which you mentioned, but also Jenkins and Catalan Studio. So what are those specifically doing?
Okay, so Jenkins, that's more like an automation server. It's kind of like the brain behind the whole process.
Okay.
Right? It helps like orchestrate all the steps in software development, and it can trigger those regression tests automatically whenever there's a change to the code.
Gotcha.
Catalan Studio, that's more of it's a complete test automation platform.
Yeah.
So it gives you a really user-friendly way to create and run all sorts of tests, including regression tests. And the best part is you don't really need to know that much coding to use it.
Oh, okay.
So it's more like, complete solution, whereas like Selenium and TestNG, those are more like the underlying testing frameworks.
Okay, gotcha. And the real world example of the banking app, the one introducing a new security feature.
Right.
I think this really highlights like why this is so important.
Absolutely. So, after they added that new security feature, the developers, they would run a bunch of regression tests just to make sure that, the core stuff like logging in, checking your balance, transferring money, that all that still worked perfectly.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine if a security update stopped you from getting into your bank account?
Oh, yeah, that's the worst case scenario.
That'd be terrible. So that's exactly what regression testing is supposed to prevent.
Okay, so it's really about maintaining that stability and preventing those nightmare scenarios, basically.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So regression testing, all about maintaining stability, keeping things from breaking. Now let's get into the final piece. This is exploratory testing. And this one sounds, I don't know, it sounds a little less structured.
It definitely is, yeah. So unlike regression testing, which is, scripted and a lot of it's automated.
Right.
Exploratory testing it's unscripted. It's way more ad hoc. So the testers are really actively digging into the software,
Mm-hmm.
They're using their intuition, their creativity, their knowledge just to uncover issues that, you might not find just by like following a script.
Okay, gotcha.
It's really about like exploring the software in a way that's similar to how a real user might use it.
Mm-hmm.
Including all the unexpected ways that people use things.
So it's less about following that checklist, and it's
Yeah.
more about...
It's more about discovery.
Yeah, okay, like it's almost an adventure. Like you're going on an adventure into the software.
I love that. Yeah, exactly. It is an adventure. So the core principles here, are learning while testing. So, the tester's understanding of the software grows as they explore it. It's about thinking critically about, where the weaknesses might be,
Mm-hmm.
and then adapting the testing process based on what they find as they go.
Okay, cool.
And a big goal here is to find those edge cases, those unusual scenarios, those combinations of actions that the scripted tests would probably miss.
Right, okay.
Like the really weird ways that people end up using things sometimes.
Right. Those weird things that we do. So how do you actually do exploratory testing? It sounds a little bit like you're just randomly clicking around.
It's not totally random.
Right.
There is some method to the madness. So there's session-based testing where, you have specific time box sessions and each one has a clear focus.
Right.
Maybe it's on one particular feature or one area of the software. And then there's freestyle testing. That's a little closer to like that intuitive exploration where there are no predefined steps.
Okay.
You also have pair testing, where you have two testers working together. And that's great because they can bring, different perspectives and different ideas to the process.
Right, right. Makes sense.
And then testers also use heuristics. So these are like general testing rules or best practices, or common problem areas that help guide their exploration. And then sometimes companies, they'll even do these like bug hunts, which are basically bigger, more focused sessions with lots of people,
Oh, interesting.
all doing exploratory testing.
Okay, so it's more like guided by experience and intuition rather than a strict script.
Absolutely.
Are there specific tools that testers use to support exploratory testing?
Yeah, there are definitely tools that can help, manage and document everything. So there's TestRail, you can use that to like organize and keep track of all the findings. Test Explorer, that can record like what the tester is actually doing during a session, including like screenshots and notes.
Oh, wow.
And then that can be used to create bug reports. And then session-based test management, or SBTM,
Yeah.
that gives you a structured way to plan and run and report on those, time-boxed exploratory testing sessions.
Gotcha. Okay, so we've really gone deep today. We've looked at usability testing, making sure software is intuitive and fun to use,
Yeah.
regression testing, to keep the software we all depend on stable after any changes are made. And then finally, exploratory testing, where you've got that creative, almost like investigation to uncover any hidden issues.
And it's really cool because like usability testing focuses on making that interaction smooth and satisfying for everybody,
Yeah.
all users. Regression testing works kind of behind the scenes to make sure that the software you depend on is reliable, with each new update. And then exploratory testing that comes in to like, find those less obvious problems, the ones that could trip you up in ways that you weren't expecting.
Right. Yeah. And this has been a really, really insightful look at these three like pillars of software testing.
Yeah.
It's amazing when you think about just the effort that goes into building, maintaining high quality software that we all, can rely on.
Absolutely. And I think, hopefully this gives you a much clearer understanding of the roles that each of these methods play in making sure the software you're using actually meets a high standard.
Totally, totally. And so, now that we've talked about all this, next time you're using, an app or a website, whatever, just think about how usability testing might have like shaped your experience. Have you ever gotten frustrated by a bug that came from, a regression? And what sort of weird issues do you think might still be hiding out there that, an exploratory tester could find? Just some things to think about.
Yeah, definitely. Food for thought.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. This has been The Deep Dive.
Thanks, everybody.